In this video, we're going to start to look at how the function body transformer works. It's really the most important transformer in the compiler plugin, and it adds a lot of information to the composable method. So we started with this goal of this composable method, which takes in a single integer value and it calls another composable method. We want to be able to transform it. And our goal is to be able to derive this transformation right here, where you add in a restart group, you have some skipping logic there. Previously, we looked at the param transformer, and its sole purpose was to be able to add in this composer parameter and this chain bit mask. All of the transformers in the compiler plugin follow a similar pattern. They all inherit this abstract class called abstract compose lowering, which contains utilities, extensions, and visitor methods that are useful for all the transformers. The function body transformer, it overrides the visit function method. So it looks at your IR tree, and what it's going to do is that it's going to visit all of the IR function types and is going to check whether it's a composable function or not, and then begin to do its transformations. The strategy that he uses to do transformations is by building a list of statements that get wrapped around the transformed body. The first statement is the restart group. It needs to tell the composer to create a restart group, and it does so like this. The second statement that gets created is the make preamble logic, which what it does is that it corresponds to creating this dirty variable. And the third statement that it needs to do is to create the function skipping logic. And it utilizes and or on the bit mask to be able to set and extract values. The last thing it needs to do is to look at the existing body of the function and add it back into the IR tree. And it wraps it around this skipping logic just like this right here. So all of these are different statements that the function body transformer creates in the end, and it does so in pieces one by one from the top to the bottom. So, and in the end, it looks like this when it has taken those statements and regenerated the IR tree. So let's look at how this visit function works and what's the logic in there. The first thing that it has to do when it visits a IR function type is to be able to create a function scope. Scope is a concept in the compiler plugin, Compose compiler plugin, and when you look at a piece of code like this, there are many different types of scopes in here. You have the class scope, you also have this composable function body scope, you also have a scope right here which is inside of this loop. So a scope inside of the Compose compiler plugin is a sealed class, and there are 28 different variations of it, 28 different function scopes. So this sealed class has a function scope, a block scope, a class scope, and property scope. And that's what it creates first. And all of this encapsulates different information about those scopes. Like a function, it will encapsulate information such as the change parameter, the compose parameter, etc. The function scope, what it takes in is the actual function type that you're visiting. And when it initializes, it's going to initialize these fields that it has internally, the compose parameter, any default parameters that it has, and any change parameters that it has. And it's going to reutilize that information later on to create other statements that we need. So these are different scopes that first the compiler plugin creates in this visit function. And then it goes in and looks at how to create the restart group. So first it needs to determine should a restart group be added or not. And there are a couple of rules that it looks for. First, it checks it's not going to add a restartable. It checks whether the function is restartable or not. It's not going to add a restartable group for inline functions or functions that have return value or lambdas, because we use compose lambda for that. You could also annotate your composable functions not to be restartable using this annotation. In that case, it's not going to add a restart group. So that's what this does. it checks whether the function should have a restart group added to it or not. If it checks, if it passes, if you have a compose function that is restartable, the way it creates this function call is by using utilities that are defined in the abstract compose lowering class, abstract class. And one of the utilities is called IR method call. IR method call takes in the composer. So you can see that from the scope, I'm pulling out the composer information to it, and I'm also providing it a start, the group, the function call, the actual function call. As the name suggests, this utility is called IR method call, so it's going to create this method call right there. So internally, what that does is that when you look at what this is doing is that this abstract class has utilities, and underneath the hood, what these utilities are doing is that they're actually using actual builder methods that are defined in the Kotlin compiler. So whenever you want to create a function call with IR, you could use a builder for that called IR call impl. And you can see that this is defined in the Kotlin compiler module called IR tree. Right in that file, you'll find all of these different types of builders that you can utilize. So the Compose Compiler plugin has a wrapper around these builders to make it easier to generate, to be able to modify the IR tree. So that's what this is doing underneath the hood. It's utilizing this method to generate this function call on that reference composer. The next thing that it needs to be able to do is to set it to a particular value, to a particular variable. And it has a utility for that called IR set. Again, this is a wrapper around this utility that the Kotlin compiler provides. So what are you going, the first parameter is what are you going to assign it to, which is our composer that we're going to, that we're mutating. So then we have the logic that we had before, which is the IR method call. So then what this generates is this function, this assignment right here. That's what it generates. So the thing to keep in mind is that the Compose Compiler plugin has a lot of utilities that wrap around the builders that the Kotlin compiler gives you to be able to create IR elements. So the next video we're going to look at is this bit masking logic. Why is AND being used here? What does the change do? We're going to look at stability also.